We will now have a very special session on the nature of the poetic. Elika Assumi, hailing from Nagaland, is an assistant professor at the National Law University, Meghalaya, focusing on the distinct and subjective narratives of India's northeastern region.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you everyone for being part of this session. So ladies and gentlemen, it is with immense pleasure and anticipation that we are gathered here today in the company of literary luminaries, Dr. Barbara S. Sangma, Janice Pariat, and Naveen Kishore. Their diverse contributions to the literary world encompass the realms of academia, fiction, poetry, theater, and publishing, reflecting the rich tapestry of voices that shape our literary landscape. So let me formally introduce our guest speakers for this session. Dr. Barbara S. Sangma is an associate professor in the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura. Her PhD focused on Achik theater. She has published several works, including String in a Lute and Achik Theatre, A Case for Indian Folk Theatre. She has also co-authored translated works and contributed articles to various books, journals, and proceedings. Dr. Sangma has presented her research in numerous seminars, workshops, symposiums, national conferences, and radio talks. Janice Pariat is the author of Boats on Land, a collection of short stories, and Seahorse, a novel. She was awarded the Young Writer Award from the Sahitya Academy and the Crossword Book Award for Fiction in 2013. Her novella, The Nine-Chambered Heart, best-selling in India, was published in the UK and in 10 other languages. She studied English literature at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and the history of art at the School of Oriental and African Studies, London. Her work, including art reviews, book reviews, fiction, and poetry, has featured in a wide selection of national magazines and newspapers. She was a Charles Wallace Creative Writing Fellow and a writer in residence at the Toji Residency in South Korea. Her latest novel, Everything the Light Touches, is published by HarperCollins India, Barrow Press, and Harper via USA. It won the Author Award for Best Fiction in 2023. It was longlisted for the JCB Prize, shortlisted for the Tata Lit Life Book of the Year Award, and was listed in the New Yorker's Best Books of 2022. Currently, she lives between Shillong and New Delhi with a cat of many names. Yeah, that's Janice for you. Naveen Kishore, theater lighting designer, photographer, filmmaker, poet, publisher, Seagull Books. Stop? Okay. Because it's quite long. Okay, all right. So, as we discuss the nature of the poetic, guided by the perspectives of these distinguished poets, we look forward to exploring the intricacies of language, creativity, and the enduring essence of poetry. So without further ado, I would like to request Barbara, Janice, and then Naveen to share your perspectives on what the poetic personally means to you. So, Barbara, do you want to start? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on. Thank you. Thank you for this great opportunity. It's too humble to say I'm not a great poet, but yeah, I'm a poet, whether great or not. Beauty is always in the eyes of the beholder, yes. Poetic, without going into any text, without referring back to Northeastern Hill University syllabus, I would say poetic is finding beauty, rhythm, if not necessarily rhyme. Poetry is finding that leap in the heart Uh, I think I would be, I don't know, destroying the earlier idea about the author's writing for himself or herself, because I basically write to please myself. I just, when I write, I feel like it should just, my heart should leap, or I should write like I must write or I shall die. That type of, I think that's my kind of poetic. And I'm not too much into rhyme, but I think I'm into that sensitivity, that kind of joy that I get when I write. It may be 2 lines. I'm also trying haiku. It may be, yeah, that type. But I think it should give me that immediate pleasure. But I'm not a very contemplative kind of writer, very planned writer. When I write, I mean, it comes from nowhere. And when I don't write for months. But when I write, sometimes I can write maybe 2 poems at a time, or maybe sometimes short ones, 3 on the same theme, something like that. Maybe something more, but for now I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Janice?
Okay, I mean, how lovely to be at a session that discusses the nature of the poetic after a really lovely session on poetry. We heard such excellent poems just before us, and honestly didn't want the flow to break. And there you are. I feel as though that answers everything for us in some way, that you listen to the poetic with all your heart, and with an openness and a receptivity and a vulnerability, as much as the person who is sharing that poetic with you. There is such an intimate, immediate connection with someone who is standing here sharing their poetry with you, right? I feel like you feel it, even if sometimes language fails to capture exactly what that it is, and language fails to capture so much, and even in that there is the poetic, right? I think for me, I find the poetic in that leap of the heart. I love what you said, that leap of the heart, of course, and a variety of other gestures. I think for me, the poetic resides very much in the mundane and in the everyday, in that first cup of tea, in that first slant of light through the window, that fresh page, the blink of a cat from across the room, someone reaching out their hand to you. There's a poem by Vijay Nambisan, and he writes about lint, the stuff that gathers under your bed, dust, and he turns dust and lint, the stuff that you want to hide away and not look at, and you try so much to clean, but it always returns. He turns that into poetry as well. So for me, poetry lies very much in the quotidian, in the everyday. And there are so many poems that come to mind that gesture towards this. There's a lovely poem which is called an ode to housework, where somebody is washing dishes at a sink. They've got their hands inside this grey, sloppy, soapy water. But what they do is they lift out a wine glass, and because it's wet, the light touches the glass and it refracts, and there is a rainbow even while it holds this swirl of grey, soapy water. And he says, look at this, the extraordinary, the extraordinary in the mundane. And I love that about poetry, that it transforms our most unextraordinary moments into something more, right? And poetry is always something more. It's never just about that slant of light. It's never just about that that blank page or that one gesture. It always alludes to something more. But I think at the same time, that mundanity, that quotidianness, gestures to something larger. And it's a feeling that I try and capture in my book. At one point, especially when there's a character who's traveling across the seas, and she's traveling to India, and she says, you know, in this one moment, she's looking at, of course, the water all around her, and she says, I think I know what it means to be in the world, because you are in this moment utterly open, and there is no boundary, no barrier between you and the cosmic. And I think that the mundane actually allows us to make that leap from the very minute to the cosmic. I would imagine that somewhere in between also lies the poetic of inexplicability, the poetic of the mysterious, that you can't really always predict what you will find poetic. And that life offers you this gift every day of discovering something new that you find moves you. And I think that also is for me very important, to have that receptivity to the world, to others, to, you know, to us sitting here, to be open to that unexpectedness of not quite knowing when the heart will leap.
Thank you. Naveen.
Hello. I think I would agree with two wonderful poets here about the unpredictability, the leap of the heart, and all of those so-called ordinary notes, to borrow a phrase. I just have a little text which in some ways is a tribute to what the two of them have just said. Bear with me. The nature of the poetic, the relationship that a shadow has with the sun, their playfulness, ebb and flow depending on the nature of the sundial, the position of the sun, the role the clouds choose to play, the shape and size of the surfaces the shadow may traverse in deliberation or accident, the agility or its lack of the shadow-bearing being, and the angle in which the sun may caress their bodily selves will often decide the fate of the shadow. Sundrian, a point of no return, where the almost violent breaking apart of a single thought, a sundering into oppositional halves, or a scattering into infinite pieces causes an upheaval, a disturbance, both apparently negative words, but do not be fooled into denying them virtue. The placid needs to be visited by its opposite for language to find utterance, particularly in poetry. The ebbing of shadows, like the receding memory of a newborn, plucked from a fast disappearing world, one that you cannot return to, shadowless by nature and yet safe within, and even in nature, as is perhaps the nature of the womb. Even as the flow into a newness from the moment of the first cry begins to gather, assimilate the noise of the world, driftwood that would soon find utterance as language. In time, the drift that suggests the random will begin to appear as tightly knit word filled with meaning. The birth of a new memory is also the moment of no return, this time of almost limbo between these two worlds, one where the erstwhile is still in the process of erasing itself, and the newborn memory has yet to make its presence felt, is in fact the moment most fertile for poetry. The nature of the poetic, a hesitant tango between the erstwhile and the unfolding of the immediate, the apparently real and the magnetism of that which is imagined. Text that resides in the image and finds a way to be born, even born. Nothing is redundant. Every bit of memory returns in one form or the other to allow the poet insight into the nature of the poetic. Insight, implying an inward seeing, turning inwards towards a hidden choice of words, an almost involuntary, intuitive drawing of breath and giving it language, like a sign that lasts, or an echo that has found its voice, an exhilaration, drawing its inspiration from an inner melancholy. This unique and individual voice is what matters, one that derives inspiration from one's passion, the kind that resides in the heart. No amount of skill and artifice can achieve this singularity of voice, a strength gained from silence, almost a courage that allows the poet to bear witness to one's own conscience. Often this is experienced as suddenly as the unexpected. The nature of that which is not expected is sudden, like driving down a mountain steepness and suddenly hitting the brake at an unexpected curve, finding yourself hurtling towards a real abyss, not just the imagined one. In those few seconds of near death, you rethink an entire life, involuntary and unexpected, causing an upheaval of immensity. Your car skids to a halt and your breath all over the steering wheel. This moment of rebirth is located within the nature of poetry. This immediacy of what Pascal Quignard calls the afterwards, or suddenly afterwards, actually finds the vocabulary of the poetic. Elegies, the poet as a grieving being, one who suffers, as she records. The paradox of simultaneously being at a loss for words, as in watching helplessly the demise of a loved one, in this case our burning planet, and being full to the brim with a grief that has no choice but to pour over and find vocabulary. Imagine our situation when the sheer exhilaration of innocence can no longer be easily expressed. We are all compromised in our bystanding. I let it happen. The virtue of upheaval and disturbance in any act of creativity. Churn memory, yours and mine, the role of memory, the role that luck plays in contextualizing the meaning into both the particular, as in this line in your poem speaks to me, and the universal. A collective chord that rings both in your head when you write that line and mine as a reader who recognizes my moment of synchronicity with the thought. That is the kind of poetic luck one aspires to. Befriending loneliness as a writing being. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. So I think that really sets the tone. And yes, I just want to pick up on three things that each of you have shared. And one is the mundane, the ordinary, becoming extraordinary, or perhaps even beyond. The leap of faith, the emotion that drives us, and the musicality that is in every language. Just as you read to us, Naveen, I think I noted that there is a sense of, I don't know how to put it in words because it's difficult to explain it, but I was just thinking about how every language has a musicality, and so I wanted to just hear your thoughts about this and perhaps just take off from there. Yes. So, do you want to start, Janice? Yeah.
I'm happy to. I love that you bring that up because it actually is such an important part of who I am as a person, as a writer. It's so hard to go after Naveen because I feel like I'm really lost in his lines and I'm waiting for more. You've really spoiled us, Naveen.
We can go together.
But no, I'm looking forward to your reading at the end of the session. But just to sort of draw myself back to myself, poetry does that to you. It draws you out of yourself. It takes you away and yet makes you present as well. It's very odd. But I love that you bring up the musicality of language, because for me that is extremely important, because even though I write in English, I've had a very convent school education, very Euro-Western centric education. I've studied in English mostly all my life. The blood of my writing and the breath of my writing comes from Khasi. And it's because I grew up here within a community of singers and storytellers, in the most informal way possible, right? We would sit around a shula on a long winter evening like this one, eating oranges and telling stories. We would gather at weddings, at funerals. We would gather for no reason at all. And for me, I think even though I don't write in Khasi, at least not yet, I would love one day for the language to welcome me home. But until then, while I write in English, I draw so much sustenance from Khasi and its wonderful musical orality. If you listen to a Nonknya, if you listen to a song in Khasi, if you listen to Pawar, which is, impromptu poetry that is composed in very particular meter and rhyme, mostly in the villages now in Meghalaya, not so much here. There is a cadence, there is a great attentive sort of focus on how words sound, how they fall on your ear, and how they beseech Ublay, how they speak to Laubasa, the forest guardians, how they speak to rivers, how they speak to the natural world, and of course how they speak being to being, human to human. Because of its roots in these vibrant oral traditions, storytelling, prayer, poetry, song, something lives in Khasi, I feel, that I try so much to bring into my spoken and my written language. So there is an attention to breath, always, because language is breath, and we forget that, no? Sometimes language for us lies mostly on a screen these days, or very much in the form of books. But I try and remind myself, my students, that language belongs here. It's in our chest. It is in the breath that we take. That's the end of a sentence, right? It's in the heartbeat. It's in the way that we walk. So the rhythms of our body are the rhythms of our language. And I think we forget that so often these days, because language lies very often at a distance to us. We negotiate with it, outside of ourselves so often. We study in schools and universities that also are extremely script and text centric, and not not really embracing the spirit of orality very much, right? So for me, it's so important that I try and build this bridge as much as I can, as strongly as I can, between Khasi and my writing in English and my speaking in English, because for me it's so important that as language falls on our ear, that's how it should fall on the page. It should sound good on a page, if that makes sense,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And just to pick up from where you've talked about this, the sound, you know, poetry in its origins, it were songs, right? And I think you have, Barbara, you've also reflected that in your work, especially when you were looking at Achik theater, right? So maybe want to hear a little bit about
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Thank you. I think I'll just maybe kind of resume from where Janice left off. You were speaking about orality, how we try to connect a language and then transcribe it into books and all that. We have two lines in Garo language, that is Darang Duan Kutang Kosak Na Tonak Pata and Na. Meaning is every bird thinks that its song is the best. So I, as a Garo, I think my language is the best. And that way, yeah. So Garos are very rich in orality. Actually, we are still very much oral folks, oral community. We don't have much in writing, but if we go venture out into the villages, you will be, you'll be spoiled for choice, because a lot of people will be telling you stories. You'll be regaled whole night. There's songs to listen to. There's a lot of sing songs, lot of orality, a lot of stories, epic narrations that goes on night after night, and there are a lot of things. I wouldn't go much into that, because I just want to I remember two lines. I feel like I must pause, because my heart is there with the lines of Naveen, Kishore. Like,
But can I just ask if that orality that the Garos, you say, still so fiercely sort of uphold, does that influence you in your own poetry writing? So I just had to ask that.
Yeah, it does. It does. But then it does, but it doesn't come out very strongly. It's there maybe in concept, but when I express myself in writing, I am just not able to bring it yet. I do not know why. I have written more in English. I'm trying, like I think you do, but then I'm very much a person of Tura, a person of Garo Hills. But just why I'm not able to write more in Garo, that's a big question. Maybe because I've done my MA in English literature. That may be one part of it. But I'm trying. There are a couple of poems that I've written in Garo. So I hope to continue. But then, I don't know. But I think language skill as such, and that orality, which I have imbibed from my mother especially, I think that comes in especially when I edit, when I go into editing, but not so much when I write. I don't know why, because I think strange are the ways of, writing and reading and transcribing, translating and all that.
So
And
do you dream in English then?
Yeah, of course I dream in English. I'm so sorry to say that, because I know many will resonate with this. I do dream in English, but I did start my education in Garo medium. Up to class 6, I was in Garo medium, but somehow I got pulled into. I began to love reading, and I really read, like I went berserk with reading, and that's about. But then I came to really read and understand poetry on my own very late. But I think that stage when a person can read somebody else's poetry and understand that without anyone's help, I think we have matured. I have a feeling like that. Because as a child, we need to be taught, we need to be tutored, we need to look into references. We are not able to make head or tails. But then I think at the time, when we have reached a point when we are able to pick up any poem, any piece of poetry, and are able to make something out of it, and feel a resonance there in our heart, feel something there hitting us, then I think we have matured. Yeah, that's all for now. I have a few lines to read
Yes.
about Shillong, but a little later, maybe if there
Okay.
is time.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we will have time for that. So, Naveen? Yes. Your thoughts on what the ladies have shared.
What can I say? I'm tongue-tied.
That's a rare moment, right?
No, not at all. Yeah. No, I'm very hospitable to language and languages, and like a lot of people, not just of my generation, but the privilege of our Indian growing up, where your average dinner time conversation like mine could be with a grandmother who was from UP and spoke Hindi with her son, my father, who spoke the Punjabi that his wife spoke. And so they went back and forth, and everybody spoke English when they wanted to, including my grandmother. And I would defer to my mother and speak in Punjabi. So there was Urdu because they grew up in Lahore. But this was all done naturally. There was nobody sitting there, documenting, hey, hello, you did this. It was just a kind of natural thing. So I tend to think in all of these languages. I'm perfectly comfortable in writing in a kind of what I call Bollywoodized Urdu, Hindustani kind of thing. But I choose English because that's my chosen growing up kind of thing. But all of this is informed by the language of theatre, in particular theatre lighting. And like all of us in this country, you turn your hobbies often into livelihood. I had to, at age 16, plunge from amateur theatre lights to making a living to support a family. So you reached out to any influence. You went to libraries and you found books of Martha Graham or some lighting designer, and you wanted to be original, so you turned them upside down. They looked more exciting. Then you passed it off as your own. All of that you did. I also learned that there were no rules about life. People in the theatre tend to light you evenly, like they're taking a portrait. But in real life, there is no such thing as even light. You take light. So I learned to light the air. And that's made me, I can only write if I hear and if I see an image. So it's usually the language of a certain kind of image, and India offers you images. You step out of your house and there's like everything is a frame to photograph, everything is a poem to write about. So there's all those kind of influences. So I'm very I like the idea of listening to language even when one doesn't understand.
So there's this, the point that you raised about light. I know you come from the lighting, from the lighting side, and one thing that resonated is also your book, Janice, right? And yes, absolutely. So, do you want to say something about this? What Naveen had talked about?
Everything, but clearly not evenly, as I've just learned. But I love the idea of lighting the air. Thought that was an absolutely beautiful phrase to use. I mean, I think what I can do is sort of just extend our conversation into what we thought we would do at this point, which is to talk about perhaps our own writing a little more, and where we employ or insert or find, because sometimes it finds us, and we've had very little to do with inserting a poetic something into our writing. Sometimes it just happens on its own. So perhaps we can do that, if that's okay, Naveen. Yeah. Okay. So. Because when you sent us your questions, I was thinking about what is it that, because I get a lot of this. I get people saying, your writing is very poetic. And I often think about, why is that so? Because it's not as though I'm deliberately, trying to do this. I write much more prose than poetry. I write very little poetry. So it's a question that had been sort of weighing on my mind, or I'd been thinking about it anyway. So when you brought it up, before this session, I had a more deliberate reason to think of it. And I was thinking about how, of course, first and foremost is the musicality that we were just talking about, and how I draw that musicality from Khasi. I think for me, what also makes something poetic is the element of surprise when it comes to language, where language is doing something that you don't quite expect it to on the page. And I think a poem is very much like that. A poem sometimes takes something that you've seen 100 million times before, and it holds it up to the light, and it shows you a different way to look at it. It shows you a different perspective. It opens up a portal, a metaphor that you hadn't quite ever connected to that object. So for example, that soapy glass of wine that refracts the light, that becomes almost like a sacred goblet. It becomes the poem, actually, that emerges at the end of those lines, right? A poem is held up to the light like that. Or Vijay Nambisan's lint, right? The dust that gathers under your bed, where it turns into a metaphor for all the things that you push away, that you don't want to think of, the things in life that you would rather sweep under the carpet because they keep you up at night, right? So that element of surprise, of looking at something or helping you look at something in a completely new way, in a way that you hadn't quite thought of before. I think the best poetry, or really good poetry, tends to render the familiar strange, right? Yes, exactly, right? I think the other thing that I try, that I've noticed that I use, at least in my work, is repetition. And I think that also comes from our oral storytelling roots. If you listen to someone tell a story, you'll see that and we all do this, we don't speak in perfect sentences. We repeat. We say, listen, no. But you're not listening to me. Or did you, I was saying this, and then he said this, and then he said this. Right? And we repeat because we think that is important, because we want to draw your attention to that particular bit of information. And it's a very interesting storytelling technique. And it's one that we employ in oral storytelling. But of course, that I notice seeps into my book because of this, this sort of receptivity, or this kind of drawing upon Khasi that I try and do. But poetry does that a lot as well. Poetry uses repetition in its verses over and over and over again, right? To call your attention, to bring your attention to one particular thing. And of course, there's a lot of playfulness in it, and a lot of fun, but also a lot of poignancy and a lot of power. There's also this rather beautiful quote that I found on repetition that I thought I would share with you, because it comes from an Arab writer, and he talks about repetition in this way, which I thought was very, very interesting. Repetition is, and this is Elias Khoury, he says, repetition is, I might say, a way of insisting that every story contains many stories inside it. The same story can be told in any number of different ways, of course. My novels try to suggest this richness, even though I can tell only a limited number of versions. In other words, I'm a student of Sherzad. I don't tell the story, I tell how the story has been told, right? So there's this wonderful sort of expansion to this idea of repetition, not just in terms of language and how we employ it in this poetic repetitive way, but also the idea that our stories do this. We are telling how a story has already been told because we draw from this resource that the world is, where all stories have actually been told. But we repeat them in our own way, and I think in that also there is poetry. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Only because of the serendipity of this thing, I took out my phone not to look at the cricket score. Can I do a little repetition tribute very briefly?
Yes, please.
Wrong specs. Yes, I do. It's my aging beauty. Hello, yeah. Parched as they are, having forgotten, those eyes struggling to dream from a distance, through a haze, it seemed, of rain that had formed a veil around her eyes, parched as they are, having forgotten, those eyes struggling from a distance, through a haze, it seemed, to dream of rain that had formed a veil around her eyes, to dream of rain that had formed a veil around her eyes, parched as they are, having forgotten, those eyes struggling to dream, through a haze, it seemed, parched, those eyes struggling, dreaming, it seemed, through a haze, having forgotten, it seemed, to dream of rain, a veil of rain around her eyes, struggling to dream, parched as they are, those eyes, through a haze, struggling to forget, a veil of rain, it seemed, parched and struggling, those eyes, dreaming, through a haze, a veil of rain around her eyes, parched.
Wonderful. Thank you. So time is running in front of us. So I'm going to open up the time now for Barbara to read. Yes, and then we'll follow it up with Janice and then Naveen. Please, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. We'll open up the time for the audience as well.
I think it's working. Yeah, it's working. It's rather long, but the lines are very short. So the title of the poem is Shillong Loved. Shillong grew in my childhood mind, far away and attractive. She meant pears and pines. She meant very cold winter and pricey vegetables. She has been preceded by a reputation for flowers and old British-style houses with protruding chimneys. Shillong has to be seen, to be believed. She is beautiful. There's a fragrance in the air of the place called Shillong. She's a beauty, and she draws me to herself again and again. I've fallen for her, her drapery of green, overlaid with various hues, and her image in my mind is intact, charming. Her myriads of flowers, rhododendrons, camellias, ivy growing like wild daisies driving mad, dandelions there just for the picking, and bewitching wild margarets dotting the graveyards, lilies, roses, fuchsias, dahlias growing everywhere, gladiola and the other tubers, orange shrubs with orange bulbs, like Christmas trees left to remain even after Christmas. Sweet peas delight my heart, as do varieties of chrysanthemums, geraniums too, though I fear the caterpillars I see in them. I would like to delete these 2 lines. Winter comes, and with it the season gets colder. In the beautiful city of Shillong, winter is for style, summer is for fashion, spring to be trendy, autumn to be oneself. But Shillong has to, Janice, please don't distract me. But Shillong has her own style. Anything, anytime. All you got to have is great confidence. Shillong, she is about smell of pine and distinctive air, the smell of stoves, fueled by kerosene before the advent of LGP stoves. She is about ride in those last surviving city buses and hailing one of the remaining ambassador taxis. Yes, Shillong is also about food of all types, jado and dojem, doshain and putaro. It's about momo, whether fried or steamed. It's about chow chow and restaurants and street food. She's about trees and shrubs laden with fruits and berries. She's about golden pears and ruddy plums and figs. She's about luscious peaches. She's about sopi and soot, sok plung and sok jiao. Oh, I don't even know all their names. Shillong is about houses, small but cute, with well-scrubbed floors. But she's also about mansions and old-style houses where many a piano gladden the hearts. Shillong is about greenery and fairy tale gardens that surround houses. Shillong is about every day pulsating with life, but Shillong is also about Sunday, when people dress to their best. Shillong is about angelic girls and pretty damsels with pink cheeks. She's about wearing boots and leather jackets the whole year round. Where are your boots today? Ah, yes, Shillong is about churches of all denominations. She's about schools dating back to British days and colleges old and new. She's about English language spoken well and spoken almost by all. She's about people, native Khasis, and from all over Northeast. Shillong is Northeast. Earlier somebody said Shillong is not Northeast, but I feel Shillong is Northeast. Shillong is about tartans, sweaters, shawls, stylish caps, and long, shapely coats, and well-tailored suits. Shillong is about pretty women and good-looking men. Ah, Shillong is about looking good, and I hope also feeling good. Shillong breeds academics. She exudes music and screams religion. She is the hub leading travelers to discover diverse lanes leading to Sora, diverting to Maulanong, branching off to Maukarwat, pointing towards Dauki, and in some stray moments, even to Tura. Shillong does not say, come to Shillong. It's people who say, let's go to Shillong, chalo Shillong. And overcrowded weekends and once natural sights turned into hat-selling, trinket-peddling shops, and people flock to Shillong, where the breeze is cool, landscape green, where food is delicious, and the air that cries, come hither, come hither. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Shillong.
Thank you,
So,
Shillong.
you have a poem to read, Janice.
I was hoping that it would in some way help illustrate what I'd been trying to share with you through the session, especially about the musicality of Khasi. I'm going to stand up and read. I don't know how to read a poem sitting down, if that's okay. So this one is called Our Names. Our names are old names, unwritten, unrecorded, wrenched from stone, Maungap, Mausin Ram, Mauplung, or coaxed from water, Yam, Lumka, Pernai, light as the wind on a white stork's back, which traveled here in summer and rested in Demthring. They aren't carved on our monoliths, The Maubinna are smooth from relentless wind and rain. We have no letters with which to etch those come and gone, save the sounds of our names we set to music. They aren't embedded in Laukantang, our sacred forests remain untouched, nor cast down rivers as sacrificial flowers. Instead, they travel with us on our children's backs in rough bamboo baskets heavier than stone. Our names are old names, untranslated, sitting uneasy on a foreigner's tongue, untraceable on parchment, save for stories behind our names we set to music. No names save for old names, after water, and stone, Mao. Where will your history be found? For that, you must play our music and search for Lom Sopet Beneng, the mountain at the center of the sky.
Thank you. Yes, we have time.
Hello. I'm spoiled for choices, unfortunately, but so I'll do 3 short things, or 2 very short things and 1 not so short thing. The first one is again something Janice spoke about yesterday, about her book and about making lists and about lists being poetry, both visually as they sit on the page and the way they come together. And my first book, Knotted Grief, which is a large part of it is to do with my memories of Kashmir and what's happening in Kashmir. And Kashmir is also a metaphor for everything else, Syria or Palestine or whatever. So it's the human condition. So this is actually an ordinary list that Anu, my wife, partner, friend, sent to me to pick up at a nearby shop, and vegetables and stuff, and it turns into something else, I hope. 4 red capsicums, 2 yellow capsicums, 1 green zucchini, 1 small iceberg lettuce, 100 grams rocket leaves, 2 heads romaine lettuce, 100 grams snow peas, 200 grams cherry tomato, 2 bok choy, 2 packets mushrooms, 1 avocado, 50 grams parsley, 50 grams basil, 1 leek, 100 grams baby carrots, 100 grams baby corn, 1 small red cabbage, 1 kilo large potatoes, 1 kilo small potatoes, 2 beetroots, 1 kilo large bangan, half kilo small bangan, 1 kilo tauri, half kilo bhindi, 1 small lauki, 2 bundles palak, 300 grams pumpkin, 1 small cabbage, half kilo kundru, half kilo lal sag, 3 capsicum, 1 bundle lal sag, 1 bundle kalami sag, 200 grams dhania patta, 100 grams pudina patta, 1 kacha aam, 12 nimbus, green chilies, 1 watermelon. Between the red of the capsicum and the red of the exploding watermelon, all that remains of the shopping list is an empty plastic shopping bag.
Thank you. We have time for just 1 question. I'm sorry, our time is running out, so I'll just open up. Yes. Any questions or anything you'd like to ask our panelists? Okay. Okay. So. Yeah. So. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Would you like to read another one from your? Yeah.
One last one.
Yes, one last one from your book. Yes.
The book is the book is called Mother Muse Quintet, and it's about my mother's descent into a fog, and eventual other griefs. She carried crumbs every single morning, the smell of bread every single morning, for as long as I can remember, for as long as she can remember. She never forgot to scatter the crumbs in every conversation, like puzzles or clues, to help her find her way home later, much later, when the mist from over there would begin to rise, stretch out, start to take charge, like the inevitable damp cling to things in and around her. Then those scattered clues, like markers in a treasure hunt, those planted hints, they were the advance guard in a war that would surely take place. But in her innocence, she had failed to realize that the first casualty would be the power lines short-circuited. The enemy would cut off her ability to recognize, to recall her master plan, to recognize the very signs she had so diligently left in place. Now, they were part of a geography lesson, a map of an alien landscape of her own making.
Thank you so much, Naveen. And I'd like to express my gratitude to our esteemed panelists, Janice, Barbara, and Naveen. Thank you all for being part of this conversation, and have a great evening ahead. Thank you.